So you are probably pretty familiar with fermentation. A whole bunch of the food that you eat is fermented food, even if you don't realize it. Yogurt is fermented, chocolate is fermented, beer, wine, sourdough bread, all bread, any leavened bread that rises is produced by a process called fermentation. Fermentation is really just an alternate pathway. So when cells can't use the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain, many cell types can use fermentation, including your muscle cells, at least temporarily. When cells are undergoing fermentation, glycolysis proceeds as it normally does, but then instead of going on to the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain, we're going to divert pyruvate and do something else with it. So fermentation allows for energy production from the same molecules that an aerobic metabolizing cell uses for energy: amino acids, sugars, other molecules. Does not require oxygen, does not utilize Krebs cycle or electron transport chain. It does use an organic molecule as the final electron acceptor instead of oxygen. So your muscle cells can do this temporarily. Not for long, but for sure temporarily. And then yeast and bacteria can do it as long as they need to if they are able to undergo fermentation. Now, remember that I told you that when you undergo glycolysis, you make ATP really fast, but you make very low amounts of it. And that's true of fermentation because all of the ATP that's being generated is in glycolysis. And so fermentation does not allow for nearly as much energy production as aerobic metabolism. And you can kind of see this when you look at a facultative anaerobe growing in a tube. You'll notice that it will grow thickest on the top where the oxygen is present, even though it can still grow throughout the rest of the tube. So it does a little better. It's making more energy in the presence of oxygen. All right, so here's a nice comparison between respiration and fermentation. Here's glycolysis, so glucose is going in and pyruvate is coming out, and that's the same for whether or not you're undergoing aerobic respiration or fermentation. If there's no oxygen, though, this process is shut down. So you can't undergo the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain without oxygen because you need oxygen in the last step. And so if you don't have it for the last step, everything else shuts down all the way, backs up the process. However, many cells can take pyruvic acid, and they can actually take pyruvic acid and use it or a derivative as the electron acceptor, the ultimate electron acceptor. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, why ferment at all? Why not just stop at pyruvate? And this is the key to why cells undergo fermentation, and it's a really key point. Remember that when we went from glucose to pyruvate or pyruvic acid, that we took two NAD pluses and converted them to NADH? So remember that these NADHs were no problem because we could just go ahead and make energy from them in the electron transport chain. However, if all you're doing is stopping here at pyruvate, what happens is eventually all of the NAD plus is converted to NADH, and now the cell doesn't have NAD plus anymore. And if you don't have NAD plus, that will shut down this process, and now you can't generate any energy at all. And so a cell that doesn't undergo aerobic respiration needs some other way during glycolysis to regenerate NAD plus from this NADH. And that's what fermentation is. It's just another step that occurs after glycolysis that results in the regeneration of NAD plus. So that's what this is showing here. So after pyruvate is made, we're going to do something to it so that we can regenerate NAD plus and we can continue to get our 2 net ATP from glycolysis over and over and over again. All right, there are 2 main types of fermentation that we're going to talk about. So first we're going to cover lactic acid, and then second we'll cover alcoholic fermentation.